So take out a folding chair and sit in the middle. I should know something about how to sell old stuff because I run the counter down at the Vinyl Record Palace. Like me, this is a neighborhood full of things closing down or just getting started. The big man in the jersey on his porch had a video store which went out of business after years and years of the dedicated following. His Carol Lombard neon sign is still up, although unlit, within viewing range of here. There's the bearded father and his lovely daughter who played Lear and Cordelia just a few nights ago in their last performance of In the Park Shakespeare. They live catty corner. 3 years ago, in 1992, I thought Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, the book, would save me. But it's in a cardboard box for 50 cents. The sun shines down as I lounge in my chair and I think about the song from the 1950s, sitting in the sun counting my money, with Frankie Lane being happy with what little he owned. I, for one, haven't much to my name other than this rented rectangle of property with 660 square feet of house. In with Men Are From Mars is a copy of I'm Okay, You're Okay, which I bought in 1975. I thought there might be a time when my wife and I might bring our two planets together. However, we used to become so angry that we were reduced to writing notes back and forth on the same yellow college-ruled pad. It's in one of the boxes too, cleared of its messages, 8.5 by 11. Now my ex-wife lives down the block and is employed as a depression counselor for a huge insurance company and makes everyone feel better except me. Me, she walls off with an unlisted phone number and tries to keep our 9-year-old daughter out of my range as much as possible. My visitation rights are once a month and she strictly holds to the legal stipulations. We are old for our daughter's years. With my landlord selling this house out from under me, I'll have to be sure to find another place here in the neighborhood, so I'm still within easy reach of my daughter.
So, Cosmopolitan recently released an article called 28 Mind-Blowing Lesbian Sex Positions. And I wrote about that in a blog for Powell's because it just struck me the contrast between Cosmo and their 28 mind-blowing sex positions and growing up in the ballot measure 9 era in the 90s in Oregon when almost half the state population voted for a ballot measure that would have classed homosexuality with pedophilia, bestiality, and necrophilia and required that public schools teach the evils of homosexuality. And I write about that in the novel that Ooligan Press has so kindly published for me. Forgive me if I've told you this before. And so, with all those contrasts in mind, and because I get to speak on the panel about difficult subjects, I'm going to read you a sex scene. Ava let her arm rest on my shoulders all evening, sometimes pulling me close and whispering into my hair, sometimes lacing her fingers through mine and examining the pattern they made. A few hours before the black sky faded to blue, our friend Christina said, "I'm going to bed. Chloe, Aaron, you can sleep in my parents' bedroom. Ava, there's the couch. Trinu, you can have the recliner. It's not bad. There's also a futon on the porch. My mother thinks it's liberating to sleep outside." I was about to say that the recliner was fine, but Ava took my hand. "Trinu and I will sleep outside," she said, "with the mountain lions." She pronounced mountain lions carefully, as though this was a new vocabulary word she had just learned. "Cougars," she added, taking my hand and pulling me toward the porch. "That's right, isn't it? A mountain lion is a cougar." I followed her outside. I didn't look at the others. I was glad the porch was dark and Ava could not see my thoughts. The futon was heaped with heavy quilts and sheltered under an overhang. The top blanket was damp. Ava touched it, then pulled back several layers of bedding. The rain had stopped, but the forest around the house was dripping. Through a break in the clouds, I could see the moon. "Come on, get in," Ava said. As she slid in, she held the covers up for me. I climbed in, and the blanket settled over me like a gentle mountain, holding me down as I stared up at the roof above the porch. It was cool and the air was damp and the blankets were cold, but I felt only the possibility of Ava's body next to mine. "Do you really think they're mountain lions?" she asked. "I don't know, you're the one who promised mountain lions," I teased. "But you're from America," she said. I smiled without looking at her. "Yes." "Have you seen one?" "Once." Ava rolled over on her side. I could feel her watching me. "When?" I had been only 5, and it was a dreamlike memory. I hadn't thought about it in years. I traced it in my mind, speaking slowly. "I was little. I was walking with my father in the woods behind our house. It was late and it was getting dark, but we know those paths so well. Then, there it was up ahead of us. It was the color of sand." Ava touched my hand under the blanket. "He put me on his shoulders," I went on, "and he said, 'Katerina?' He never calls me that. That's my mother's name. I'm just Trinu. He said, 'Katerina, put your arms out like you're flying and hold your coat open big.' Then he said, 'I'm going to turn around, but you have to look behind us and tell me if it's coming.' Then he walked back the way we came, really slowly, and I watched it the whole time, and it watched me." I hesitated. Ava's hand was warm on mine. I wanted to say, "This is the one thing you should remember about America." "What do you think he would have done if it came after you?" she asked. "I don't know. He would have fought it, I guess." "I know he would have died for me." I stared past the roof up at the stars into the dome of God. I thought maybe I could tell my father. A time to keep silence, a time to speak. I could tell him about Ursula and Ava and Deidre, and he would understand how beautiful a girl can be. "You weren't scared?" Ava asked. I thought back. No, I was just proud that my father trusted me. I felt like we had gone back to this place, this ancient time where children could be brave, you know? There's no place to be brave anymore. You just show up and fill in the Scantron and wait for tomorrow. "I think you're brave," Ava said. She rose up on one elbow and put her other arm across my chest. And then she kissed me. Moonlit beneath that cedar sky, my entire consciousness focused on the place where her lips touched mine, and I felt like we were the only people in the world. There was only the circle of our kiss, her fingertips on my cheek. We might have been the first 2 people formed out of clay.
Hi, I'm Mel Wells, and I wrote a piece in the new book, Untangling the Knot, and it's called Turbo, and the incident in it happened almost exactly a year ago. So I'll just start. It took me 16 years to admit to myself that I had a crush on my volleyball coach at Pocatello High School in southeastern Idaho. Coach Billy was barely out of college, a paradox of athletics and engineering nerdiness, who described her own gait as lumberjack and wore her hair cropped, but also wore a dress to the big game against our crosstown rivals. I was a blonde Amazonian sophomore whose friends sometimes called Turbo because I approached everything, homework, crafts, cleaning, with a zealous impatience bordering on mania. I still do. But I'd forgotten about those late afternoons practicing in the gym, shoes squeaking, sweat dripping, a tight feeling in my lower belly whenever Coach Billy addressed me. These memories were buried deep, but one of my friends from high school posted an article on Facebook that dipped inside me and stirred. In the photo, I immediately recognized the painted boulder sitting on the front lawn of a brick building. There's an old tradition at Pocatello High School to paint the rock for important games, graduations, reunions, and so on. This time, it was painted white with the words, "We miss you, Turbo." I did a double take. There was also a picture of a blonde girl. I clicked the link. The headline said that a female student had committed suicide, followed by a phrase I was unprepared for. Quote, "Family says teen was bullied for sexual orientation." My throat was too tight to gasp. I kept reading. Maddie Stanger-Hollifield was a sophomore at Pokey. We climbed those same stairs, sat in those same classrooms, practiced volleyball and basketball in that same gym, changed in that same locker room, and navigated those same hallways lined with huge framed collages of alumni dating back to the late 1800s. I'm certain she passed the class of 2000 photos many times, walking underneath my photo in the bottom row. Her nickname was Turbo. She was out to her family about her sexuality, whereas I am only now adjusting to the fact that I've been attracted to women for as long as I've known what attraction feels like. When I walked those scuffed halls in the late 90s, I passed under the graduation photos of my great-grandparents, grandparents and their siblings, and my parents' cousins. They were all Mormon in high school, so was I. Every weekday I crossed West Clark Street to attend seminary. The building was squat and ugly compared to Pokey's soaring Art Deco masonry and roof-lined turreted with stone urns. I attended 4 years of religion classes, memorizing verses from the Book of Mormon, and vacillating between yearnings for rebellion and acceptance. Pocatello is not an easy place to be different. It's the kind of place where a member refers to being a baptized Mormon, and every other lifestyle is lumped into non-member. It's a place where California Mormons move to buy cheap McMansions and have plenty of members for their kids to date. It's a place where the church means Mormon, where freshly engaged couples in the community section of the newspaper are all in their early 20s and registered at Walmart. Coffee shops are vastly outnumbered by chapels, and the only bookstore is Deseret Book, which is owned by the church. For time's sake, I'm going to skip a little bit about my grandparents accidentally raising me as a feminist. Mostly because long before I knew the word feminism, I knew what it felt like to be treated as an equal to my male cousins. I left Pocatello 2 days after graduation, but it took me another 7 years to come out as a non-believer to my family after I'd built a stable life in Portland, Oregon, where I gravitated to the queer community, noting how similar our coming out stories were. Now I find myself facing another closet door, hesitantly pushing. After seeing the news about Maddie, I texted my mother. I heard a girl at Pokey committed suicide because she was being bullied about being gay. What the heck? That's heartbreaking. She never responded. At least she still talks to me. My father does not. But gradually, cautiously, most of my family members have learned that I'm still the same person. It's taken me a while to trust that love, to believe that they aren't trying to pull me back into the faith. I'm scared to upset that fragile balance that we've struck. I confess to wondering, why bother? I'm out at my work and in my community. What is the value of visibility if I lose communication? I cringe imagining my sweet grandmother, my cousins who are siblings, and, God forbid, my mother, picturing me in some sex scene a la the film Blue is the Warmest Color. I keep putting off having them visit that church-owned website, mormonsandgays.com, to read the pandering language about how lives are impacted and they are working through difficult challenges, as though they're dealing with someone who is binge drinking on the regular and buying kiddie porn instead of just falling in love. According to this website, same-sex attraction is okay, but acting on it is a sin. Currently, at the time, I lived 961 miles away from my girlfriend, so technically I'm not acting on my attraction very frequently. But what about my giddy grin when she texts or calls me, or how I think she's beautiful in her photos, or the way that I feel lit up inside when she smiles on Skype, or how I want her to feel the same? What is acting on, anyway? My feelings for her are more than tingles when she touches me, or lightheadedness when we kiss. I've known lust. When she and I are together, fully clothed, arms around each other, just talking and laughing, I find myself thinking, this feels like home. And while Pocatello will always be my hometown, I am no prodigal daughter contemplating a return. Sometimes I meet other ex-Mormons, often gay ones, and I feel the recognition of fellow refugees, speaking in our mother tongue and swapping stories about adapting to new cultures. And we escaped. It got better. I will never get to have this conversation with Maddie. Although we never met, I'm sure that our acquaintances, even our bloodlines, have so many tendrils linking us together. Who knows how many times on those high desert plains we passed each other. But this little member of my tribe did not make it, and this crushes me. Sorry, it's been almost exactly a year. And I did meet her mother, and they're fantastic. I had to ask her about publishing this essay because I used her daughter's real name, and she was like, "You're amazing, I love you, do it." So it was really cool. So when I do tell my family that I'm dating a female, I don't want them wondering who is the man and who is the woman in our relationship, because we're both pretty femme. I want them to remember that delicious sensation of falling in love, of staying up talking until 2 a.m. and laughing at each other's jokes, thinking, oh God, they get me. I want them to remember the exhilarating sensation of being known and appreciated. Because being gay is not all about sex, it's not even about marriage, it's about love. And I confess, I looked up Coach Billy while online, and I discovered she recently came out in a Pocatello City Council meeting testifying in support of a non-discrimination ordinance. Her bravery made me tremble, especially when I read some of the comments, but I also feel a small budding of hope. I can't help but dream of change. Of the day a sophomore volleyball player at PHS develops a crush on her female coach, confesses it to teammates in squeals and giggles, and is teased in the same affectionate, silly way that a crush on a dreamy male English teacher would merit. I dream of a gentler handling of each other's hearts. And while I cannot legislate my own family's hearts, perhaps I can be a little turbo again, in the sense of pushing forward to this future of more honesty and more love, toward an understanding that gay love does not threaten straight love. Love cannot threaten love. After all, according to the one Bible verse that still resonates with me, even God is love. Perhaps I should have more faith in it.
So I'm also in this book. I think it's available to buy out there, which is really exciting. I haven't touched it before today. Growing up in a poor and violent family, I was stuck too many times in the middle of nowhere. In a school bus on the side of the road, waiting for a money order to arrive at general delivery. In a cabin without electricity or running water, hungry for our welfare check and food stamps to come on the first. At a motel, unable to secure permanent housing, not knowing where we would go next. I was babysitter to my 2 younger brothers while our mom and dad fought, until I was called in as mom and dad's marriage counselor. Being poor means to wait, and being a poor kid with parents consumed by their relationship turmoil means to wait to escape. Marriage seemed to come 2 ways, broke and full of domestic violence, trauma bonding, and misery like my parents' union, or of the middle-class television variety, growing pains and family ties. Primetime representations of relationships felt as unattainable to me as the economic status and social capital TV characters had. By the time I saw Roseanne and Dan Connor's marriage, which was more stable, more blue-collar, and funnier than the one in my own home life, but still more familiar than the rest of television, I had already made up my mind that I wouldn't have kids and I wouldn't marry. I was 9. It was 89, right? To choose to not marry was a political choice against all I saw marriage as standing for: violence, denial, and isolation. While my queerness and trans identity later influenced my choice to not marry, only recently did I realize that, along with homeownership, I've been priced out of marriage. An online dating site popped up on my computer recently. 1 in 4 people say bad credit is a deal breaker, the ad flashed. With over $100,000 in student loan debt, I'm sure I'm among some peers in the room, I am not in the most desirable fiance category. The number of us heavily burdened with student debt is only rising, increasing the number of supposedly undesirable fiancés. Credit bureaus are now using who our Facebook friends are to determine our credit worthiness. This practice, if nothing else, shows how increasingly class segregated we are as a society and how almost impossible it is for poor people to get out of poverty. Underneath large sums of debt that prevent us from marrying and owning homes, where can low-income single people house our passions? I've been in a romantic relationship with another low-income, no economic asset person for 7 years, almost 8 now, and the fact that neither of us wants to marry or have kids or practice a religion influences our staying together. Both of us have felt pressure as 30-somethings from other people we've dated to marry compulsorily, that marriage is just what you're supposed to do to deepen your love, that marriage is the logical next step. Along with polyamorous ethics informing our decision to not marry, working nonstop and paying off both our debts so we can get into more debt for houses, cars, kids, and pets would severely constrain the flexibility needed to pursue creative endeavors. Despite the barriers, poor people are really good at building relationships. We know relationships are the most important resource there is. Queer punk communities have popularized mutual aid, at least as a concept, but poor people have always practiced it. An alternative to marriage in the queer community I'm a part of is communal housing and communal land ownership, a site of queer utopia. However, oftentimes a queer person with access to financial resources owns the house and other queers live in it with them, reproducing dynamics of familial disparity. Through cultural differences and lack of access to money, poor queers are priced out of these supposed queer utopias. There are so many skills poor folks have to contribute to communal projects that may not involve money. We have a lot to teach about the impermanence of having, the impermanence of relationships, the impermanence of home. We know what to do when shit hits the fan. Without the privilege or entitlement to having it all, we've had to see beyond the set of currently available alternatives and develop strategies for thriving creatively in the current economic system. Both my mom and the character of Roseanne have stated their regrets on marrying. Both presumably heterosexual women wanted something more for themselves and their children, but didn't know what that would be or where they could plug into society to get it. During their biggest fight, complete with object throwing and Roseanne's destruction of the television set she said Dan was addicted to, Dan accuses Roseanne of failing as a mother. Roseanne retorts, "The only way I failed as a mother is to let Becky and Darlene get married so young that they threw their whole life away on a man just like I did. Before my mom married, she was an actress in a dinner theater, and in her most vulnerable moments has told me she regrets not pursuing those dreams." This culture propagates and then profits off of our feelings of not enoughness, a feeling we have to marry in order to have social value or even self-worth. I want a queer utopia where I have a polyamorous marriage, first with myself, then with my passions, and then with all of my relationships. For me, it's a privilege, a freedom to not marry. Marriage, queer or not, still looks like a road to social and economic isolation. Coming out as a queer teen, I defied the expectations that I be heterosexual, married, and childbearing. How can we apply that same defiance so many of us asserted in our youth to the current economic system, with the goal of increasing intimacy and creativity in all of our relationships? There's so much merit in LGBTQ folks fighting for something we've been excluded from. But what's next? What exists beyond that having? Thank you.